What's up everybody, it's me Lone. I hope you're doing alright. It is kind of crazy to say, but the Fallout Amazon TV show is out next week. It's releasing on the 12th of April. We're getting all of the episodes at once. I cannot bloody wait for it. I think I am going to do a review of every single episode, so keep an eye out for that. But what I want to do today is go through this great write-up that IGN did recently. I'll link it in the description below, where they did a rundown of the entirety of the show, interviewing the cast, telling us information that we didn't know yet. So I'm going to go through the entirety of this article, but please check it out for yourself on IGN. They put a lot of great work into it. But boy, let's get into this thing. I'm so excited. If you enjoy this video and you find it helpful, please like, subscribe if you're new, with notifications if that's possible. But let's get into this thing. All right, so this is the article. I'm going to read absolutely everything verbatim. I don't want to miss out on any bits of information. So get comfortable, strap yourselves in. We're probably going to be here for a little while. But this is what they had to say. On October 23rd, 2077, the world is plunged into thermonuclear war. Atomic blasts strike most of the major cities in the United States, and the civilians not killed outright either flee to underground shelters or are left to fend for themselves in irradiated wastelands. Based on that description, you'd be forgiven for thinking that Fallout is another story about grizzled survivors doing whatever it takes to see another sunrise. Think Joel from The Last of Us, think Max Rokitansky from Mad Max. I'll just pause there and say, I think the direction of this article is to try and appeal to people that aren't necessarily fans of Fallout, right? If you don't know about the series and you need to be caught up, this is probably the article for you, though there are some very interesting bits for those of us that are hardcore fans. But the thing that I'll point out here is that it's interesting how they tried to really differentiate Fallout from Mad Max. Fallout, as we know, was heavily influenced and based upon Mad Max. Yes, it went in a different direction, of course, but I think it would have been good and helpful at this stage to say, hey, it is influenced on Mad Max, it's somewhat based on that media, but it is different in these kinds of ways. So that's just my opinion. But let's continue the article. Think anyone, literally anyone, but Lucy McLean. They actually described her as Leslie Knope meets Ned Flanders, says Ella Purnell, who plays Fallout's idealistic hero. According to Purnell, the showrunners asked for a chance to pitch Lucy to Purnell even before the actress had a chance to see the script. And thank God they did, she adds. I can totally understand that. If you read the script of this, happy-go-lucky Vault Dweller, you might think, what the hell is this? But it's there for a reason. Fallout has that underlying comedy, so I think that was a really good approach that they took with Ella Purnell. But let's continue. That's because Fallout is a different kind of post-apocalyptic story. Based on Bethesda Softworks' long-running video game series of the same name, Prime Video's new show about life 200 years after the end of the world has assembled a murderer's row of talent both behind and in front of the camera. The talent that they've brought together for this show is awesome, and I especially keep highlighting Walton Goggins as the Ghoul. I cannot wait to see all of these actors and actresses in action. I think it's going to be sweet. And better yet, it's the brainchild of executive producer Jonathan Nolan, whose work on the Dark Knight trilogy and HBO's Westworld series have primed the pump for this kind of ambitious storytelling. And he's also a fan of Fallout. It's important to note, he's absolutely played Fallout. This is why he wanted to approach Todd in the first place for it. And they, go into this in a little bit of detail here. So they say, as he prepares for the release of his series on April 11, Nolan reflects on the magic of his own first playthrough of Fallout 3. Quote, I knew almost nothing about it. That's the best way to play. Nolan, who also directs the first 3 episodes of the series, explains, and could not believe the ambition, the scope, the scale, and all the different textures. But what makes Fallout unique to Nolan and the millions of people who have played the various games is the tone, which he describes as simultaneously epic, dramatic, dark, emotional, but also political, satirical, and crazy, deeply funny, almost goofy. I think that's a pretty good way of describing Fallout, and I just love that I think his first experience with the franchise was Fallout 3, my favorite video game of all time. Hopefully, that influence of Fallout 3 has really kind of embedded itself into this franchise, but it's clear there's also some influences with Fallout 4, especially with the art direction and the graphical style, stuff like that. But let's continue. Setting the stage, Fallout may offer a grim vision for the future of mankind, but don't worry, it's not our future. Not exactly anyways. Fallout takes place in an alternate universe, one whose history diverged from our own in the years following World War II. steeped in the tradition of retrofuturism, a mode of storytelling that builds on the now absurd imaginings of 1950s science fiction. Fallout explores a world where both robots and Bob Crosby are humankind's greatest accomplishments. And while this Fallout does spend a good amount of time on the events before the Great War, more on that in a minute, the show shares the game's vision for humanity's new future over our sudden collapse. They really feel like they're about the beginning of the new world, Nolan explains. It's not dour in that way. It's about all these cultures that spring out of the wounds of the old world and where it's all headed. If anything, Nolan is underselling just how manic the video game series can be. I think he is a little bit too. Running the gamut, from cartoonishly violent to absurdly silly, the Fallout series is constructed as much from the DNA of direct-to-video apocalypses from the Cold War warnings of the end of the world. The games in the series draw comparisons to Radioactive Dreams, A Boy and His Dog, and Hell Comes to Frogtown, low-budget takes on the apocalypse that lean deeply into the absurd. The exec producers and cast break down Fallout's characters in the exclusive video below. You can watch that. That's actually a brand new video. I'm not going to go into that in this video because we got so much other things to cover. But continuing on with the article, it says, how does one split the difference between B-movie madness and big-budget storytelling? It turns out you don't. For his version of Fallout, Nolan turned to terrific writers and showrunners, Geneva Robertson Dorette and Graham Wagner, real-life friends who come from very different writing backgrounds. Robertson Dorette's previous credits include films like Tomb Raider and Captain Marvel, while Wagner has built a name for himself in 30-minute comedies like Portlandia and Silicon Valley. It's a very interesting combination between Robertson Dorette and Graham Wagner. I, again, was like, I don't know, someone that directed Tomb Raider and Captain Marvel, how they're going to go in dealing with a series and a franchise like Fallout. But I'm confident. Everything that I've seen so far, it seems really good. Yes, they've taken liberties in certain directions with the series that many people might not necessarily agree with, but I understand it. Adapting video games can be very, very difficult. Everything that I see, touch wood, looks good, so I'm confident that these two can pull it off. But continuing on paper, these may seem like very different approaches to storytelling, yeah. For Robertson, Dorette, and Wagner, it was a match made in heaven. Quote, we'd been wanting to work together for so long because we wanted to merge my sci-fi action instincts and his comedy instincts, Robertson Dorette explains. That's actually a really good point. I didn't think of that. And adding that a lot of sci-fi projects don't really want to have a sense of humor and are very self-serious. Really good point. Like, I didn't actually think about, Wagner's comedic background with the stuff that he's dealt with, and Robertson Dorette dealing with a lot of sci-fi. Pretty cool. So again, I'm holding out confidence for it. I think they're going to do a pretty good job between the two, but we can only judge it when it comes out next week. While Wagner fully admits it might sound pretentious, he points to the screenplay for The Favourite as a North Star for the series. It drove me effing crazy because I was like, how did someone who knows history and writes such a well-researched history movie also be funny, he explains. It was only after reading about the script's history, what screenwriter Tony McNamara added to Deborah Davis's original draft, that the light bulb went off. It's two brains, he adds. That's why I like this movie so much. I was watching two specialties at play. And for all of these reasons, the mashup of genres, the blank slate of a post-apocalyptic world, it was never a question as to where the Fallout series would be set. While more recent versions of Fallout have been set in locations like Massachusetts and West Virginia, this series is set in the cradle of entertainment itself, the wasteland of California. It really felt irresistible to us, given on a meta level that here we are, the Hollywood folks are coming to adapt these games, Nolan explains. That's really interesting that they've said that, because I always thought that it would have been Todd going to Amazon, who obviously approached them with the series, and being like, hey, we want you to tell this story in the West Coast, not the East Coast, because it separates it for all the plans that we might have with Fallout 5 and beyond. Because as we know, BGS has very heavily dealt with Fallout in the East Coast, right? In West Virginia, in Massachusetts, Boston, and New Vegas, and, obviously the original Fallout games have been on the West Coast. So I thought that's how it would have gone, but it seems like they're implying here they approached Todd and said, hey, we really want to do California, we want to do LA, and it kind of makes sense for us because we're Hollywood. So very interesting. I wonder which one is true. Maybe both are true to some extent. But anyways, continuing, surviving the wasteland. In the 200 years since the Great War, life on the surface has gotten a little contentious. It will come as no shock shock to anyone who isn't a Vault Dweller at least, that humanity continues to thrive in the aftermath of the nuclear war. But society as we know it has devolved into violence and feudalism, with pre-war relics providing the closest thing we have to a unified currency. I think they're referring to Nuka-Cola caps there. In the games, players are given the lowdown on life in the wasteland from companions, the people they chose to partner with on their journeys. This is an approach that Robertson Dorette and Wagner have recreated with the Ghoul, Walton Goggins' undead bounty hunter. When we meet the Ghoul, he's hardly a hero, even an anti-hero would be a stretch. That's really good to hear. But the showrunners knew that Goggins was the right guide for audiences to a post-apocalyptic America. Quote, I think in our earliest conversations back in 2020, Graham and I were like, oh, if Walton Goggins played a Ghoul in a Fallout show, I would totally watch that, Robertson Dorette explains. That was one of our earliest creative decisions, and Graham and I have talked about how stupid that was in retrospect, because what if he had been busy? What if he had been busy, man? Walton Goggins is perfect for the Ghoul. This is the thing that I'll say about the Ghoul, though. It's like, I think there's only one Ghoul in this TV show, and I wanted to see more. The thing about Fallout is that ghouls are everywhere, right? They were really affected by the Great War. It's not just one Ghoul, but I understand if they're trying to, adapt this again to a TV show, to a different format, trying to explain this story to people that don't necessarily know Fallout. Maybe just having the one really good Ghoul character like Walton Goggins is a nice way of doing that. Plus, I don't know if there's not going to be any other Ghouls. There could be other Ghouls, but in the build-up and in all the trailers, they're just focusing on Walton Goggins because he's a big-name actor. So I get it, but I've not seen another Ghoul yet, and I would like to see some other Ghouls to help emphasize the lore of the games a little bit more. There's not just one Ghoul in the entirety of the West Coast. But anyways, continuing. Thankfully, for showrunners and Fallout fans alike, Goggins was thrilled with the idea. Hell yeah. I thought it was a complex and absurdist and satirical and subversive, the actor explains, which is right up my alley, and a challenge to play two people at two very different times in their life, split up by nuclear fallout. So he's referring to the fact that his character exists before the Great War and after the Great War. It's like before, when he was just a human and had a family, and we've seen scenes like that, and then after the Great War, when he was affected by all the nuclear fallout and actually turned into a Ghoul, and has become a very different character. As we've seen with Ghouls in Fallout, they would be completely different before and after the Great War. Now, the Vault-Tec dude from Fallout 4 maybe isn't as different as he used to be, but it seems like this is the direction they're going with Walton Goggins' character, and I absolutely love that, right? He should be drugged out, he should be crazy, he should be affected by the craziness that is post-apocalyptia in Fallout. But let's continue. The two people also includes Hollywood icon Cooper Howard, who audiences will spend time with in the run-up to the Great War. To understand the character, Goggins researched Hollywood idols in the 1950s, trying to understand how a man like Howard would exist in a society still shaped by post-World War II entertainment. So, are they saying that his character is going to be Cooper Howard? He's a Hollywood icon? The two people also includes Hollywood icon Cooper Howard, who audiences will spend time with in the run-up to the Great War. So I think he's playing Cooper, like his original human, it was called Cooper Howard, and he was a Hollywood icon, and then he's the Ghoul, a completely different character. I think that's what they're trying to imply here. That's pretty cool. I like that. All right. If that's the way that I'm reading it, I think that's a pretty cool juxtaposition. All right, cool. I started watching a lot of movies and television shows like James Annis in Gunsmoke, the actor explains, working to understand the niche celebrity that allowed Howard to move between several corporate factions in pre-disaster Hollywood. I think that's what he's talking about. Who were his contemporaries at the time? Who were people that he lost out to? Was he the first call? Probably not. And then, here we go. Wagner likens the Ghoul to Marvel's Wolverine. What the hell does that mean? That's exciting. By the way, you can tell I haven't read this article before. I'm trying to, digest this for the first time. For Goggins, on the other side of the apocalypse is the Ghoul. Those lucky enough to survive the radiation of the Great War found their lives extended by centuries, but not every Ghoul retained their humanity in the process. Yes, we're going to get feral Ghouls! Maybe. Many of the Ghouls you encounter in the games, especially in the tunnels and subway systems below major cities, are feral and dangerous, yes, which gives a bad name to the zombie-like survivors trying to make ends meet on the surface world. Of course, surviving that long is its own kind of hell. The transition from Cooper Howard to the Ghoul, okay, so that is what's happening. He is Cooper Howard before the Great War, and then he becomes the Ghoul. I'm really going to be interested to see that. That's pretty cool. So the transition from Cooper Howard to the Ghoul was 200 years in the making. and Goggins draws on every year of that existence to fuel the metamorphosis. I can imagine, as you or anyone else, the horrors that he's seen the day after, a week after, the actor explains. Seeing loved ones separated, seeing loved ones melted, all of these things. It really feels like Walton Goggins is taking this seriously, right? Like, he's and obviously we're going to see this tease out in the show, but he's trying to create this character. You know, before the Great War, he had a family, he was seemingly a Hollywood celebrity, and he had purpose and meaning, and then to be thrown into this post-apocalyptia, and you're having to survive, and there's carnage, there's violence, there's drugs, and you can see how the Ghoul character is now in a lot of the trailers and the footage that we've seen. That's a huge difference. That's the huge transformation to undertake, and it seems like Walton is taking that very seriously. This is why I've long said, if there was anyone that was perfectly fit to play and portray a Ghoul in Fallout, it is absolutely Walton Goggins. As the show progresses, Goggins' character also provides the showrunners with opportunities to start filling in the gaps. As the show progresses, Goggins' character, they've just said the same thing twice. Wagner likens him to Marvel's Wolverine, here we go, whose long lifespan has allowed writers to insert him into pivotal moments throughout modern human history. It's a really delightful device for us we hope to explore more of as the show goes on, he adds. So it seems like Walton's character is going to pop up time and time again, especially as they're jumping to different points in time. So I think that's going to be really cool. But again, I would like to see that with other ghouls, because other ghouls would absolutely exist and they also have long lifespans too. Anyways, and if the Ghoul is our introduction to the residents of the Wasteland, then Philly, the small marketplace where the Fallout characters face off for the first time in episode 2, is our introduction to civilization as a whole. So moving on, Nolan wanted audiences to experience the Wasteland as he did during his first playthrough of Fallout 3. Brother, you are speaking my bloody language. When players are dumped from the vault into the appropriately named community of Megaton. Quote, I just remember the beauty of the way that environment was designed, Nolan recalls. All around this central unexploded Chekhov's nuke in the middle of the town. Hell yes. If he is trying to replicate the moment of Megaton, I'm sold, brother. I'm sold. Fallout 3, my favorite game of all time. Nolan, I think you're going to make my dreams come true here. Philly also has a centerpiece, a giant pile of trash that is slowly sinking into the earth. That's pretty much his equivalent of the nuclear bomb. A landfill basically becomes their gold, their mines that they dig into extract old bits of technology, old bits of trash, Nolan adds, calling the design of the city a fantastic opening salvo that helps introduce audiences to the interplay between pre- and post-apocalyptic California. And that might be a little bit as well as to why the Brotherhood is interested, because they're talking about old bits of technology, and what does the Brotherhood steal? Absolutely love. Maybe that's how they segue into the story, but we might find out later in this article. And while Goggins jokes about the challenge of putting on the Ghoul's makeup, admitting that he did not learn his lessons when he played a similar character in Maze Runner, The Death Cure, the emphasis on the practical with the production design is something that caught him by surprise in the best way. I thought I was going to be looking at a fucking green screen for 9 months, the actor jokes. It's not, they built it, it's all tactile, it's all tangible, man. Hell yes. I love Marvel, all right? Lately, the movies haven't really hit the chord as they used to, but we are seeing so many green screen movies, so much CGI, and clearly this show has CGI. Like, you can't achieve some of the scenes that they are with the nuclear war and whatnot without some level of CGI. But it feels like they're using as many practical effects as possible. So it's good to see that Walton Goggins' Ghoul character is not just a bunch of dots on his head and he's looking at a green screen, right? It is actually practical, makeup. It is actual stuff. It is things that you can touch. It's all tactile. It's all tangible. I freaking love that quote. That's really good to see. I didn't want to see a CGI Ghoul. If we ever saw Super Mutants, for instance, you probably need to have that as CGI. But maybe they can do it, with actual makeup. Who knows? With practical effects. But moving on, life in the vault. So now we find out about Ella Pennell's character. If the violence and madness of the Wasteland are on one end of the spectrum, Vault 33 exists far, far on the opposite end. Think of vaults as nuclear panic rooms. Those families who are wealthy enough to earn a spot in their local vault could ride out the apocalypse in style with enough supplies to last the hundreds of years it would take for radiation on the surface to die down. I wonder if they're going to mention anything about the Gek and that stuff. Maybe that'll come up in the story. Vault 33, also rendered in all its physical glory thanks to the talents of Fallout's production team, continues in the series' grand tradition of isolationist utopia. I really stuffed that up. The families we meet early in the series seem lifted straight from a 1950s sitcom where everyone knows their neighbor and the biggest conflicts can be resolved with a short story and a firm handshake. It is here that we meet Ella Pennell's Lucy, the daughter of the Vault's overseer, played by Kyle MacLachlan. Lucy is the platonic ideal of what it means to be a Vault dweller. Like everyone else in Vault 33, she believes that it is her responsibility to help usher in a new era of humanity to the Wasteland until the Wasteland proves itself more than she could ever imagined. More than she ever could have imagined, sorry. So this really does feel like it's picked straight out of Fallout 3, right? Literally the same storyline. You have your dad and you go finding your dad. In this case, it's Lucy. Her dad probably goes away, the overseer probably goes missing, and she has to go find her dad. That's probably what they're getting at here. The difference being is that her dad, in this instance, is actually the overseer of the Vault, and they're not meant to leave the Vault. They're meant to be there to implement the experiment of the Vault, whatever it might be, unless it's actually a control Vault. And I don't think we quite know yet whether Vault 33 is a control Vault. So let's continue. Purnell used Ella Kemper's performance in Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt as a source of inspiration. Okay, fair enough. Quote, "It was always important to me that she had somewhere to go, that she could start in a place of a complete innocence," explains Purnell. She's never really had much hardship, at least not as much as people in the Wasteland. Of course, she's very privileged. And that's exactly what's going to be when you have a Vault dweller, right? They haven't been exposed to the Wasteland yet, so they're starting off on the right track here. Purnell has a tricky job as Lucy. Vault dwellers are not an unknown entity in the Wastelands of California, let alone everywhere, right? Take a sip of your drink every time someone calls Lucy a fucking Vault dweller in the first few episodes. But for both the comedy and the adventure to work, Lucy must balance naivety and competence in equal measure. To that end, Purnell also used Ellie Kemper's performance in Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt as another source of inspiration. She has this optimism and this innocence, and it's all she's ever known. Purnell says about Kemper's character. What rounds out Lucy is her ability to rise to the occasion, with Purnell pointing to the clip of her first confrontation with the Ghoul as the moment that she really has to make the first choice about who she wants to be in the Wasteland. And that's what we need to see from this character. She can't be happy-go-lucky forever. Just like our character was in Fallout 3 and every other bloody Fallout game, we become hardened to the Wasteland. We get exposed to some really messed up stuff, to some really messed up characters like clearly the Ghoul is in this TV show. So that has to affect Lucy in some sort of way. She can't just be like happy and inspirational, motivational the whole bloody time, all right? She can't be like Moira in Fallout 3. That's bloody annoying. We want the main character to develop as a character, right? To learn, to adapt to the Wasteland. So I'm liking this so far, I really am. Moving on, but while Lucy may head to the surface world, the story of Vault 33 does not end there. There is one thing that the Fallout show can do that the games cannot: cut back to the Vault after the hero has left. Oh, I mean, okay, I get what they're saying. I mean, in Fallout 3, you do go back to the Vault, but you are the hero or the main, protagonist going back to the Vault. According to Nolan, one of the things that excited him the most about the script was his showrunner's desire to continue the story of Vault 33. Just because Lucy left the Vault doesn't mean that we have to, Nolan explains. There's a whole community back there that you've gotten to know a little bit. I think those are the scenes where, if you remember, the Vault dwellers are going crazy, and they're probably going crazy because her dad, the overseer, has left, and now she's left. Probably the next person in line that was meant to be the overseer, and that's just my speculation, but they've both left. Now things have probably turned to shit. So I think that's what they're getting at there. And they're right, referring to that whole Fallout 3 quest thing. We should be seeing the storyline develop without the inclusion of Lucy. Maybe Lucy comes back to visit. Who really knows? I think that would be cool. But moving on, for Robertson, Dorette, and Wagner, the residents of Vault 33 also serve a very important narrative purpose. They allowed a series to juxtapose the violence of the Wasteland with the privilege that comes with living in Vault 33. So is it a control Vault or not? Quote, "It's very fun for us to be able to cut from some hell on the surface scene to our happy Vault dwellers harvesting potatoes and planning bingo night," Robertson Dorette explains. I'm thinking this is a bloody control Vault. Maybe the other Vault is actually a crazy Vault. Who knows? Lucy may not be aware of the events in Vault 33 after she leaves, but the way her community reacts to hardship also helps audiences better understand her upbringing. Purnell dug in deep with the showrunners to better understand this alternate version of America. If the entire function of the Vault is to create generations and generations and generations of Vault dwellers who truly believe that their entire life's purpose is to rebuild America, how does that influence your attitudes towards relationships? The actress explains. Towards sex, towards education and reform. Purnell, no stranger to big screen adaptations, having starred in Never Let Me Go and Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, knows expectations are high among fans for Fallout. She's even spent a good amount of time in online forums, calling the Fallout Reddit her best friend when it comes to better understanding the world. Interesting. What threads have you been in the Fallout Reddit? I would think the Fallout Wiki might be better for that. But regardless, moving on. But while she does hope that fans love the series as much as she does, she's grateful for the chance to play someone new in the Fallout universe. I had a slightly easier job because Lucy is an original thought, she adds. And I'm sure that would be easy for her, right? Blank canvas, blank slate, Lucy is a new character. Try and act the best that you can. It's not existing characters for all the characters. None of them seem like they're existing characters, so the actors and the actresses have a bit of flexibility and wiggle room to really develop and tell these characters' stories. So moving on, I told you this is a very big article. We're now talking about the Brotherhood of Steel, my favorite faction. Then there's the Brotherhood of Steel. Despite being one of the most advanced factions in the aftermath of the Great War, they are essentially a group of militaristic ideologues whose overriding mission to recover and control pre-war technology often reveals a complicated relationship with the communities they inhabit. That is a very good way of describing the Brotherhood of Steel. They're absolutely not perfect. Our introduction to the Brotherhood of Steel in Fallout comes via Maximus, a young man working to earn his place among the Brotherhood's recruits. When we meet Maximus, he's in the middle of a beating, that speaks to the Spartan lifestyle the Brotherhood undergoes. Aaron Moten, who plays Maximus, finds them just as complicated in the show as they can be in the game. It sounds like he's played the game as well. They are devout, he explains. They are about technology. They are certainly capable of monstrosities in the wasteland as well. They're literally telling the Brotherhood to steal perfectly, all right? This is good. They're not just a good faction. They absolutely have downsides. They want to project this sense of power and violence, and they want to control the wasteland. Control the wasteland to further their goals. They don't want to control absolutely every city and every town, but they want to control technology. And if they need to control bits of the wasteland to do so, then they will. I think that's the difference there. On the moral spectrum, from Lucy to the Ghoul, Moten's character sits solidly somewhere in the middle. Maximus is really torn between what is a pursuit of his own personal glory and rising in the ranks with the Brotherhood, he notes, and what is a pursuit that is more noble. Most of the power and violence comes in the form of the armor itself. Over the first few episodes, audiences will get a good look at the power armor in action, including the ability of the Brotherhood of Steel to go head-to-head with mutations and mercenaries alike. With mutations or with mutants? But to really bring the power armor to life on screen through practical means, the Fallout team relied on the combined performances of both Moten and the stunt actor Adam Chippy, the man behind the mask for most of the action sequences. That makes a lot of sense. Like, you don't want to have actors being also doubling as the stunt actors, because if that causes an issue, if someone breaks an arm or a leg, it just puts the filming out for a week. So that was probably the best approach that they could take. And then obviously he can just record his voice lines over it, and that's fine in post. Moving on. I've never had this working relationship with the stunt actor, Moten admits, describing the amazing collaboration that he and Chippy underwent before, during, and after each action sequence. Sometimes I would walk at a rehearsal as if I were in the suit, Moten explains, mimicking the bulky movement of the power armor. It's a tough job to be in that full suit because in order to express in it, you have to move a lot. And I think that's why they've changed the helmet of the T-60, because in the other video that I mentioned before, he kept saying T-60s. So I think this is a T-60 power armor in terms of how they're referring to it. But I think that's why they changed the helmet and the way that it opens, so you can see the character's face without the helmet needing to be fully removed. I think that's what they're getting at. It is a hard job to try and properly act with the suit on without being able to express any emotions in your face. You have to use entirely body language. And it's the same thing that happened in The Mandalorian, which is why, even given the lore of The Mandalorian, they still had the scene where he showed his face, right? bit of a spoiler for you, but hopefully you've watched it by now. So I think that's why they've done it, which is why I personally don't mind the change that they've done to the power armor suit and the helmet. It still looks like bloody power armor. I still think it looks cool. But moving on, when the time comes to share the man inside the armor, Fallout borrows a page from the Iron Man movies. Here we go. Closing in on Maximus' face inside the helmet as he manages a heads-up display that will be instantly recognizable to fans of the game. Hopefully it's very similar, that would be cool. When asked about the secret to giving a good Robert Downey Jr. performance, Moten laughs. Quote, often it's that communication with camera ops and Jonah saying, does it look like I'm looking at him here, he notes. It's super technical, but I really love the technical aspects of filmmaking. And while the first few episodes set Maximus off on a solo mission on behalf of the Brotherhood of Steel, the threat of war lurks around every corner. Rival factions such as the Enclave and the New California Republic. This is the first bloody official explicit communication and confirmation that the Enclave and the NCR are in the show. I think this is it. Rival factions such as the Enclave and the New California Republic are out there in the wasteland, and in time, the series promises to zoom out even further and let us see the scope of mankind's conflicts. You can't not bloody have the NCR in Fallout New Vegas, in the West Coast, right? They are so heavily involved in the West Coast. They're much bigger than the Brotherhood of Steel on the West Coast. The NCR has to be in this show, right? They absolutely have to be. The Enclave, maybe not so much, but the NCR, they need to be bigger than the Brotherhood of Steel. They need to be able to kick the Brotherhood of Steel's ass every now and again because they outnumber them hugely in the series. But anyways, where the Brotherhood will ultimately sit on Fallout's grand morality chart is best left for the audiences to experience themselves. Nolan likens the journey to his own experience of playing the games. Man, I'm so glad that he's a bloody fan of the franchise. You've got all these different factions that try to recruit you into them, he adds, and you have to decide, without a lot of context, are these the good guys, the bad guys? And usually it's a bit of grey. Usually it's in between. You got Kaisar's Legion, you've got the NCR. They're not always perfect either. Brotherhood of Steel. So I like what Nolan's getting at. I think it's clear that he's absolutely a fan of the franchise. So what comes next? As the season unfolds, audiences will learn more about our trio of unlikely wastelanders and a whole lot more about Cooper Howard, whose road to survival promises both darkness and comedy in equal measure. But even with... Oh my god, I finally get it! Oh, okay. So in the trailer and in the marketing material that we've seen for the Fallout TV show, when Walton Goggins was playing that character of like, hey, this is the vault, like he was selling the vault to audiences, I think that was actually his pre-war character. It wasn't just for the purposes of the skit. It wasn't just for the purposes of the trailer. It seems like he was actually an actor, and that was part of the show. And even so, Cooper Howard probably was involved in the advertising for Vault Tech to advertise the vaults. That was probably his character. Oh my god, how did I just only realize that? That's freaking cool, man. Oh, alright, but even with brand new characters and locations to explore, the show has only begun to peel back the surface on the larger Fallout series. Both Robertson, Dorrat, and Wagner know that there are a lot of creatures and events that fans want to see in Prime Video's Fallout, but they're also aware that these things take the time to do right. They do. Wagner compares it to Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Sure, I remember turning on season 7 and it was a demons on the couch talking about a breakup to a witch, he recalls, and it was just like, oh, this is a lot. But then I went back and watched the first episode and it was just a girl at a high school who finds a vampire. Yeah, you got to start somewhere. You can't just go right into the deep end. So fans, take heart. If the showrunners are lucky enough to get more seasons of the show, please help me God, I hope they do. They are ready to pull out all the stops. We want to get to the Fallout equivalent of the demon on the couch talking to the witch, Robertson Dorrat adds, but that might be for a couple of seasons down the road. I really hope it's approved for more seasons. It's going to be so cool. For his part, Nolan believes that just as with Batman Begins, he's lucky to have the chance to work on a series like Fallout when the industry is ready to treat these kinds of adaptations with the seriousness they deserve. I was there, close to the ground floor, let's call it the mezzanine, of the comic book adaptation, Nolan adds. I'm now standing close to the ground floor of the video game adaptation moment. So pardon the Fallout team if they build their world one important piece at a time. After all, they don't want to set the world on fire, they just want to start a flame in your heart. Very nice way of ending that article. I really enjoyed this article, IGN, you did a great job. Let's get back to the camera view to finish this video. So as you can tell, I'm very excited for this Fallout show. I cannot wait for all the episodes to drop. I love that I just had that epiphany about Walton Goggins' character. That's so cool if that's actually the case, and it feels like it is after reading that article. So let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below, Wastelanders. Are you more excited about the TV show? Are you ambivalent? Are you less excited? I'm keen to hear your thoughts. And until next time, this has been the Lone Vault Wanderer. Please take care of yourselves, and would you kindly keep fighting the good fight.